Patrick, when did you first realise that soft risks are often more important on project delivery than technical risks?
It's interesting, Stephen. I think as we know, construction industry is all about relationships. Ever since I started as construction management on site, building those relationships meant that effectively I could deal with the problems. I suppose it was not until later in my career that I sort of realised why it was working, and this sort of burning realisation that ultimately those softer issues of how people relate to each other, whether the culture fits, all brought with it complexities which I don't think people had recognised. Coupled with my sort of growing knowledge of technical risk management, really meant that I was seeing a very hard process, but actually realising that all the issues weren't being managed by that hard risk management process. And I suppose it was when we were working on Wembley Stadium that ultimately that was a challenging project, but basically a relatively large, complex building, but most of the complexities were coming from the political environment. So with the amount of due diligence that was happening from the various funders and everything else, all of the issues that were coming out were technical. Everyone was worried about would the arch fall down on the stadium. Well, of course it wouldn't. It was engineered to not do that. But actually, as we all know with Wembley coming out in hindsight, the amount of disputes that came off the back, those we could see in the very early days were triggered by the constraints that were being imposed. The political process meant that it couldn't be aired, dealt with. And I think it was that sort of sowed the seed, and it wasn't until really a few years later that we found a way of resolving that.
As one of the key members of the team that has developed Radar, what was your inspiration?
I think it's coming back from the inception of ResoLex some 16 years ago. The whole sort of process of mediation and alternative dispute resolution and finding different ways to talk through issues really sort of taught me that risks are no different to a dispute. They just haven't grown to such significant importance. I've always felt there's got to be a better way of resolving issues. Simple mindset that once you understand the problem, you can solve it. But getting people to understand the issues is probably the hardest bit. What we then tried to do is taking that as a concept, evolve that around a structured process, and certainly with the advent of smartphones and IT means that the virtual world is now far more prominent than it was certainly 16 years ago. Is that with that online questionnaire, which people are used to working with nowadays, you can glean so much evidence if you've got knowledgeable parties who are actually reading the data that comes out. And I think that's where it then came from, and it's subsequently grown from that into a panel of two, with a projects expert and a disputes mediator trained expert. The two techniques combined with a set of raw data allows you to spot things that those actually in the detail of that project can't really see.